Chris Johnson.
Episode 2 with the incredible Gretchen Menn, who is currently writing new solo material and almost always on tour with Zepparella. Check out some of her music in the Players Pick podcast playlist on Spotify. So thank you for doing this, sitting down with me and talking. This is awesome. So this is Players Pick podcast number 2 with Gretchen Menn.
I'm so happy to be here.
Hi, Gretchen.
Hi, Chris.
Having tea. I've got some genmai cha with some matcha in it, right?
Yes, and I'm doing just straight matcha.
Straight up bowl of matcha over
exactly,
there. Yeah. So nice. I mean, what, you know, like, so it's interesting because I meant to actually listen. You gave me your most recent record.
Oh, yeah.
And I have it. I listened to it once when you first gave it to me.
Yeah.
And I can't find it. And I thought, you know what?
We can fix that.
I'll listen to. But it was just funny because I was like, I'm gonna listen to Gretchen's stuff on the way here. She says yes, that's cool. Like, so I listened to the first record.
Yeah. Hail Souls.
Hail Souls. Yeah. So I listened to that and it was like just soaking you in. And I was thinking, wow, I was just listening for the influence and listening for what your voice is on the instrument. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if I had to say like what you were influenced by without asking you, I was like, oh well. I mean, the note choice harkens and says, and the tone choice says a little Eric Johnson, and I think that maybe is like on your sleeve a bit.
A little bit.
Yeah. So which I kind of already knew because I'd seen you play some of your solo stuff at the Mystic Theater years back.
Right.
And it was like with Angeline and
yes.
I don't know who the drummer. Tom Perry is the drummer.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, so that was cool. And I remember like hearing it then, and then as the album kind of progresses, you hear more. There's obviously more, like I can hear a little Jeff Beck. I can hear, and there's just this obvious classical influence. This like,
oh yeah.
And then I don't know. It got to like maybe it's not on that record though. It's a minor swing.
Oh yeah.
Which has got the
cover.
Django.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. I didn't know that you rocked the gypsy jazz too.
I don't know anything. Well, let me put it this way. I love gypsy jazz, and I have loved gypsy jazz almost as long as I've loved guitar.
Really?
Oddly enough, this was the benefit of having a dad who was really interested in guitars. Even though he didn't play much, he's more of a writer. He definitely pointed me in the right direction when I started getting into, like, one of my friends had discovered Led Zeppelin, and I was like, well, this is cool. And he was like, oh, well, then you should listen to the Yardbirds, and for that matter, Jeff Beck. And I remember, like, rating his kind of music collection, and at one point I think he pointed me in the direction of Django Reinhardt, and I just went nuts with that. I listened to the Quintet of the Hot Club of France like nonstop, and I was
cool.
like 15 years old. Nobody at my high school was listening.
I didn't find Django till my 20s. So I didn't know.
Yeah.
You know.
So the cover of Minor Swing is not because I know anything about the traditional gypsy jazz technique. It's a whole other language, and I am not even remotely fluent in it. So I knew that I would probably ruffle some feathers of gypsy jazz purists, but my feeling was that if you come to music with a pure intention and spirit and a genuine love for it, it's like, okay, so I'm not doing the correct way that they do the picking and all of that. I don't have, but the point was, as I did my best, I learned it. I adapted the violin part, Stefan Grappelli's part. I adapted that for electric guitar. And I just thought, I'm doing this for me. I love it. And I had been taking a long time to get my second album out because it's a lot more involved. And I thought, I did this for fun. I accidentally kind of learned the whole thing. I might as well record it while I have it under my fingers. Might as well do a video.
Folks that are listening right now, this is what happens when you sit down with greatness. They tell you about how they accidentally learn Django Reinhardt songs. So you're not doing a good job of humbling here. But I'm giving you trouble because it's interesting and it's you did a great job on it, and I like that there's an electric aspect to it too, because you didn't forsake and try to match, because I think that's an interesting part when an artist has that humility, and they say, well, I mean, I'm not gonna like try to like do what everybody else has done. I can't hit the style exactly. It's just not in my soul, but I'll do what I can and then bring my own voice. and you did that.
Well,
So.
thank you. I appreciate that. And actually, this totally works into sort of the topic of this, which is picks, which is when I went to record this version that I did, I went and I bought some gypsy jazz picks, and they were expensive, like $20 a pick.
Super.
And I'd been playing with them, and to me they actually sounded a little bit bright. Now, granted, I'm not playing on like a traditional gypsy jazz guitar. I recorded this on my Steven Strom Eros guitar, which is beautiful, and it's just the acoustic guitar that's what I learned it on. Mm-hmm. And so I went into the studio, and I was playing with this big, thick, expensive gypsy jazz pick, and I kept thinking, like, God, it's just... I don't know. Like, I know this is what I'm supposed to be playing, but it's not sounding right to me. And so I did a blind test with 2 expensive gypsy jazz pick and a Dunlop Jazz 3. And, played the same thing, had the engineer record it, and then he played it back to me in random order. And without a doubt, we were, like, so clear. I was like, it's the Jazz 3.
Wow.
So that one...
And it's been a red nylon Jazz 3 for most of your time,
Yeah,
right?
I mean... In all fairness, I know some people really have a strong opinion about the sound of the red ones or the black ones. I don't notice that huge of a difference. I mean, they feel a little bit different, but I can't say that, like, I hear a huge difference. But I certainly prefer that red is easier to find on dark stages.
Well, and I don't know that you're going to be able to discern a audible difference between the two, but the black one is stiffer. That's all. So you got it. The feel is a little different. That's the primary thing, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, since we're here, like, well, then, what was your first memory of a guitar pick? Like, can you kind of remember who gave it to you? Was it your dad because he played?
I know exactly. I remember exactly what it was. It was just a very normal, just regular guitar pick. It was an Ernie Ball one, and it was like hot pink.
Perfect.
And I just remember, it's so funny because you can't keep picks around. Like, picks, like, there's this wormhole to this other dimension where all the picks go.
Yep.
And this pick, I remember just this one single pick just being in my dad's house for, like, years.
Huh.
It's crazy how long that thing lasted. And so the first time I ever picked up a guitar, I think I probably used that pick on it. But then, as your ears did not deceive you, Eric Johnson was my first inspiration to play guitar.
Oh.
And my first direct inspiration. I think I had been primed to that point. I mean, I was listening to Joe Satriani and Steve Vai, so it isn't like it was totally out of left field. But Eric Johnson, seeing him live was when I was like, I'm going to try to play the guitar. And so right away I was like, okay, what do I need? I'm like, okay, I need an old Fender Stratocaster. And once I started looking for those, I was like, okay, maybe not unless I'm going to sell a kidney.
Right.
But I can afford the Jazz 3 picks. So the first picks I ever purchased are the picks I still use now.
And that was because of Eric?
Because of Eric Johnson.
Because he was playing the red Jazz 3? Yeah.
So it's like, and then every now and then I would try another pick, and sometimes people will hand me a pick and be like, try this pick. And I feel like if you do Jazz 3 picks, it's really hard to go to anything else. At least it is for me. I can't even imagine playing with like a big, floppy, thin, flexible thing.
Because you're so used to that very precise precision, and it doesn't take up much room in the fingers, right?
That's the thing, is people are like, how do you play with such a little pick? I'm like, have you seen my hands?
Well, but the same turn, like a lot of people go, oh, well, I can't play guitar, I have small hands. And
that's true.
And then I see plenty of people with amazingly not large hands doing amazing acrobatic things.
Hey, Django had 2 fingers, so nobody has any excuse.
Okay, so back to that for a second.
Yeah.
I remember, I was going to ask you, did your dad or did somebody tell you the Django story when you found Django, or did you kind of like come across that later?
I think I've always known that. I'm trying to remember when exactly I heard about it. I think my dad must have told me. I assume he did, that he told me about these 2 fingers being fused. And then I remember my favorite recollection of that story is Tony Iommi talking about it.
Oh.
Do you know, in some ways I consider Django like the godfather of metal, because it was...
Because he influenced Tony, right?
Well, apparently Tony had, and this is in an article that he was quoted in, had his accident. and had quit playing guitar and was like devastated. And then I think it was one of his teachers or friends, he said, played him this glorious, ripping gypsy music. And he was like, dude, why are you doing this to me? You know I'm devastated. And the guy said, because that guy had 2 fingers. And he said he made him totally rethink just what was possible on the guitar. He got the prosthetics. He went to lighter strings. He started playing those, big, heavy riffs. So in a way, Django kind of contributed to that.
To our having Black Sabbath.
To metal.
Yes. Thank you, Django.
Thank you, Django.
Well, that is interesting. I think the version of the story that I know, I found when I was taking a music course in my early 20s in Seattle, and it was like a music appreciation something, and I'd always heard of Django, but the only thing I really knew about him was that movie Sweet and Low Down.
Sweet and Low Down, yeah.
Which my brother showed me and was like, I know this is like not a real story, but what a fun story, because isn't Django, like, you should know, Django's like a real like legend, right? And it's like, we watched it together and I was like, this is like so hilarious and like such, but I don't know, it was such an interesting, it made me go back and like read about him. And I think that it was like a celluloid flower cart.
Yes. That
caught fire. So it's interesting to me that celluloid, one of the first primary materials for picks, caught on fire and burnt his fingers, and so
that is such a, I hadn't even thought about that.
Just a small little connection that I'm like, oh, interesting, because I mean, everybody in the beginning, it sounds like, from what I understand, I'm no pick historian, I just enjoy guitar playing and happen to work for Dunlop, so but I think from what I gather, like, other than like random bits of things that people would just use, like some people use coins or whatever, but all the early great players were all celluloid guys. I think D'Andrea maybe was the pick company of choice back in the early 60s, and I'm still sorting out some of those details in my brain.
You're the one I would be asking about this, because I'm even less of a
I'm not an authority. I just claim to enjoy the nerdery around it, right? So maybe through a few 100 of these podcasts, I'll get some of the information along the way, because I'll talk to somebody and somebody will be like, oh, I know. Yeah. Here it is. Yeah. Right here.
You've met your nerd. Here we go.
So I don't need to study too hard beforehand, because somebody's gonna know.
Right.
So with that, so you went straight to Jazz 3 right away because of Eric Johnson.
Yep.
And I know that you've tried some other picks, but like, where are you at now? Have you kind of gone through a little bit of a phase and then come back a little bit at all, or is it?
No, I mean, I never longer than really just picking up a pick, playing with it for, I don't know, maybe a half an hour maximum. I mean, it could be 30 seconds to 30 minutes, and then just being like, no, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So I'll try stuff out, but it's like, I feel like, at least for me, so much of how I play and how things feel are really, that's your point of contact with your instrument. I mean, what you think about how classical guitarists are just constantly, driven to distraction by their nails. It's like that's our equivalent as electric players.
Right. That's a good point. And so are you using the max grip now? Is that what you're at?
That's okay. So for live playing, we play sweaty stages and hot clubs and humid and stuff. So I do use the max grip for that. Although it's really funny, because I don't think I've ever dropped a pick during a set. Maybe during a sound check, and certainly I drop them all the time when I practice. But I don't think I've actually ever dropped one during a show. But I'm so paranoid that I will, that I kind of like just psychologically the feel of the max grip. Even though the prime tone and the Ultex, that's what I feel like I like the feel of best, like if I'm recording or if I'm practicing. Like earlier today I was using, there's a prime tone right there on my coffee table. That's what I was using. But a lot of, I have a little pick case right there on my coffee table, and I just pull out whatever's there. And sometimes I do like going between different Jazz 3s, like I said, the Primetone or the Ultex or the red ones or the black ones.
Sure, but it's always a Jazz 3.
It's always variety within the Jazz 3, never Jazz 2 or anything like that.
Well, which is funny when you go back. It's like, I don't think the last generation or two even know there was a such thing as, you would assume there was a Jazz 1 and a Jazz 2, which there were.
Yeah.
But I mean, nobody it just they nailed it with
the Jazz
3. You
yeah.
know, like what more do you want? The only thing that's like more aggressive than a Jazz 3 really is a Tortex Sharp, which is like a much larger pick but much sharper.
Yeah.
And that's got its own cult following.
Yeah.
Not quite as large as
yeah.
Jazz 3, but it's got its own thing.
Well, and people sometimes will give me picks. Like, I've got some, and again, these are things that are like $20, $30 picks that I know people swear by and they love, and like, I'll try them out and I'll be like, okay, that's cool. Anyway, back to the Jazz 3.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm very pick monogamous.
You're committed. I like your style.
Yeah.
It's good. Then, so, I mean, do you think... So the material, you said something about, like, the prime tone is kind of the tone, though, because there is a definite difference in material here.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with nylon with the red and the black, and this is Ultex.
Yeah.
So what about the prime tone kind of makes you like, well, that if I had to choose one and I wasn't worried about dropping it.
Right. It's very difficult because it isn't a controlled experiment. You know, I'm not playing with my stage gear through my whole stage rig. So in order to give it a fair test, I would have to just A/B it through exactly the same thing.
Sure.
I think what I find that I like about it is, what I like about the Ultex is there's that slight texturedness about it that I really like. The prime tone is much smoother, and I guess I like them both for different reasons. I feel it's less in terms of necessarily hearing a very distinct difference and more in terms of how it feels.
Okay.
And how something feels will affect how you play.
Totally.
And so that's where it all comes from anyway, right? I mean, and that's why you can get people who have incredible tone playing picks that you think, how can they get good tone out of the pick? Well, it's because it comes from them.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately the tools that we use that get us comfortable to allow us to express what we're trying to express with the least resistance. So...
Makes sense.
I know that isn't a very good answer about what I like about the prime tone.
No, it's great.
I think it's that I like the way it feels. And I do like the precision of it. I like... It feels accurate, but it also doesn't feel overly harsh. I don't feel like the highs are too bright. I don't feel like it's muddy with lows either. I feel like it has a nice balance of tone.
Nice.
And the pick grip that I use, you know, if your observation about my Eric Johnson influence I wear on my sleeve, anybody who's a Steve Morris fan can tell in 2 seconds who's one of my other biggest influences, because I use the Steve Morris pick hold.
Oh, right. So it's the first finger and the middle finger and the thumb.
And then I extend my pinky to mute the higher strings.
You got fairy finger.
Exactly.
Yeah, fairy finger.
Yes.
That's cool. It's like it's also maybe can be Dr. Evil kind of
a little 1 million picks.
$1 million. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of the pick angle can make a big difference too, right?
Totally.
And so for me, I feel that with the grip that I use, with the tone that I think my ear wants to hear, it's the point of contact and the one most changeable part of your sound, and yet picks are so humble. You know what I mean? People use them as like they're disposable. They don't get... They kind of don't get the same level of credit that the more expensive parts of our gear are, and yet what is... It's the point of contact between your body and your strings, on your right hand. So how they feel is paramount.
Can I see the way you grip it again from the thumb side? So you have a significant amount of pick left, like between your thumb and the tip. I'm noticing.
Yeah, about like that. No, yeah,
that's how I hold.
Oh, you do? Yeah.
And I know that everybody's different, but it's interesting because like when I hold Jazz 3, I feel like, oh wow, it's like close in like that.
You know, and this is something that very well could... I would be surprised if I didn't change some of the grip based on what I'm playing. I'm pretty sure that if I'm playing like big heavy rhythm chords, I'm more inclined to use more of the pick.
To back off a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
How are you? The interesting thing that when I look at that and I try to mimic what you're up to there, the thing that I'm already like in my head worried about is like palm muting, like the ability to mute the strings with my thumb towards the bridge, right? Because I feel like this takes me out a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
Where it's because you're kind of coming in kind of more direct. Versus being closer in.
So I mute with this part of my hand.
Oh.
So I have this part of my hand like fixed, right? So I'm coming at the strings like this. Right. And actually what it also does is it allows you to play, say, muted stuff on the low strings while also really muting the higher strings.
Right. So I guess the bottom part, the pinky side of the hand is really the palm mute. I guess when I say that, I think about being close. Yeah, you just corrected me. Actually, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So this puts here, but with this, I feel like that my pinky side kind of doesn't. Maybe that's why your pinky's out, right?
That's why my pinky's out.
Okay. Now I get it.
Oh yeah. It isn't just to look delicate.
No, I didn't think so. But
yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'm seeing with that out, then you can just lay it down.
Yeah. And the other advantage, and again, it's like, we learn so much imitatively. We learn to speak by listening to our parents or the people who raised us or whatever. And when I was getting into guitar, I was watching my heroes. I was watching Eric Johnson and Steve Morse. And what I always thought was really cool, like you see that Steve Morse is all over his volume and tone knobs a lot. He does a lot of volume swells and everything. And having your pinky extended like that, it's just like, it's right there. You've got this volume control that...
Right.
Yeah.
Especially on a Strat style guitar.
Yeah, it doesn't help you with Les Pauls.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I like a lot is for artificial harmonics. It's like you don't have to do anything.
Look at you.
You're all over the place with artificial harmonics.
Okay, so you can go up there and grab that.
Super easy. I mean, all you have to do is just like extend your first finger.
Yeah, see, I would reach with my middle finger.
For the artificial harmonic?
Even though it's... I know because what you're showing me sounds great in theory to me, but like if I would turn and like do a weird thing like that, and I don't know, but I don't do those like you do those. So
it's funny how some of these decisions that almost seem just random end up factoring into how you approach your instrument.
100%. One of my best friends growing up, the guy that I started playing guitar with, Ryan Miranda, he has a unique style. He's kind of, in a weird way, not really like Marty Friedman, but kind of like, how Marty has the weird kind of overhand.
You read my mind.
Were you going to say that?
I was just going to say, there's some people whose technique, you look at it and you're like, how does he sound the way he sounds while doing that?
See, Marty seems like a total anomaly to me. I think that 100 people could try it and do what he's doing and never get it.
Yeah.
But it's funny. My buddy Ryan is actually maybe a little bit more like how Misha Mansour was originally. Misha Mansour, it's kind of like cocked forward like this, and so there's a thing, and he kind of did a similar grip to yours in the beginning, and he has this thing here where I'm like. I'm just two fingers and cocked back towards this way. So and that changed. There was all these little things. I'm like, oh, can't you play just like this? And he's like, no. I'm like, he's like, can't you play it like this? And I'm like, not like that because it's weird. Like and for whatever reason, I remember him like picking up triplets like immediately, and I think it was somehow, his disposition and that style, and where triplets for me were strange, and I was like, oh, groups of four were really easy, and he was like, oh, you do those weird groups of four, and I don't. Can we do it in triplets? And I'm like, no, that's not how I wrote it. Come on, man. We go back and forth. But
that's interesting.
So I have another quick thought though. It's like, because it's interesting that you're in Zepparella and that you're the Jimmy Page, female Jimmy Page, and did you ever research and figure out what he played, and did you ever try what he played, or was it just too late by then?
No, actually I should say that I changed the way that I picked a few times. So even though I sort of have settled on, at least for now, I'm a work in progress, this having this kind of Steve Morse style be like the main place where I'll settle down. I start on classical guitar, so sometimes I'll do things with more of a classical technique. For a lot of years, I played in the traditional way.
Okay.
And it was more that I just found, for the same reason, I mean, Steve Morse is the one to talk about his technique, that certain types of string leaps are a lot more consistent if you have your hand kind of anchored. And I think that some of that comes from my having started on classical guitar, of this desire to have sort of polyphonic sounds, which sometimes means juxtaposing high notes against low notes, and the technique just lends itself to doing that, I think, in a way that's a little bit more natural. So, but back to your question about Jimmy Page, no, I mean, I think I've approached, I mean, I do watch, I do study. I'm not going to bring, like, I have a tubeplex right there, but I'm not going to bring that on the road.
No.
You know, and...
Well, I mean, I actually am alluding to, like, because he's a Herco user, right? Like, he had the big, flat, regular style, like, yeah.
Well, and he uses much thinner strings than I do, too. I use 10 through 52s, and I think he just uses, like, regular 9s.
Yeah, I think
I shouldn't say much thinner. They're thinner.
Thinner.
And especially the lower strings are thinner.
A gauge down.
So,
yeah.
Well.
But you're a hybrid player.
Yeah,
so
right, exactly. So, and actually, I think I have 11s on one. I have 11s on one of my Les Pauls, because the one that's in DADGAD, I have 11s on that.
Cool.
But in terms of, like, going through all of his gear and everything, there are people who make an art of that.
Sure.
And I have to confess, I'm not much of a gearhead. Like, I will nerd out on more of the musical side of things, but I kind of just want to find gear that I like, have it be reliable, and then not have to think about it. The idea of sitting there and tweaking on stuff to try to get it to sound right or to dig deep, it's not my thing.
Sounds great. Actually, I'm similar in that
really?
respect. Even though I'm in the world of nerding out around gear, and I do find it interesting to a point.
Yes.
When it comes from my personal writing or enjoyment, I'm like, turn it on, flip a couple knobs, and go. Like, I want to try to express an idea that I have swelling in me, and let's get to that quicker. Because that was the whole thing with getting recording equipment at home, and I bought all this stuff. I've got a desk full of all the things with the monitors, and I can you can come to my house and jam. I've got like the V drum kit set up. I've got bass, 2 guitar rigs, keyboards, and vocals. All just can go right into the computer. But I found that in that process, I'm like, man, I like learning. Every new thing is like almost like learning a new language and new instrument,
right.
And I got kind of like option paralysis. I'm like, okay,
that's such a great term. I'm gonna steal that.
Too many things, too many options makes me like kind of just go, I don't want to do any of it, and so I just kind of came back around. Okay, keep it simple, stupid, like just kind of just chill it out and flip a few switches. So that's my main gripe. I love like the fractals and like those things and the Kempers.
Right.
And I'm impressed that people can make those things sound as good as they do.
Yeah.
Give me a tube amp, like that's got like, less than 20 knobs on it, please.
Yes.
Please,
Yeah.
That's kind of my...
I'm totally with you on that. And I feel like, we've all got our own paths, and we all derive different amounts of inspiration or discouragement from our gear. Some people... I can't speak to his creative process, but you look at somebody like Adrian Belew, and it's pretty hard not to imagine that his gear is part of his creative process.
Right.
For me, I think that I share the same kind of frustration and the same short attention span for some of that gear stuff. On the other hand, it's like, give me like a Cantus Firmus and I'll work on 4-point counterpoint like forever. Like I've got lots of attention for that. And I've got lots of attention for different types of energy investment. I think we all do. I mean, anybody who says they're lazy, it's like there's usually something that they're pretty committed to.
Depends on what's motivating, what you're motivated by.
Right, exactly.
And honestly, I mean, this is a great kind of segue. Like, I'm interested in knowing, like, what does motivate you? What is your... I mean, do you have, like... some sort of thing that's in your life that is maybe a rule, some sort of rules or to live by, or what keeps you going?
That's a good question. I think I'm fortunate to be a naturally motivated and energetic person. Like, I wake up happy unless something really bad has happened. My default is motivated. My default is a lot of energy. So that's great. My challenge is that a lot of times I've had to learn how to fully engage in things more. I think that it's really easy to live life and to do things with the absolute minimum energy required, you know? Sure. And if you want to get good at something, you can't be mentally lazy. So even if you're going through, you can say, oh, I practiced, 4 hours today, but was it 4 good hours?
Right.
Were you challenging yourself? Were you sweating during those 4 hours, or were you just kind of playing stuff and having fun? Not to say that there isn't a place for that too, but if your intention is to grow, then there is a lot of discipline required. And so for me, I think what keeps me going is recognizing where my pitfalls are and then trying to plan around them. I know that if I can get up in the morning and I can be productive right away, then that kind of fuels me for the rest of the day. It's a lot easier for me to pick up my guitar being like, oh, okay, I got in 2 great hours of practice before lunch. I got the rest of the day to, return emails, to check in on friends, to get some exercise, and then, 2 more hours. Like, I'm not somebody who practices 8 hours a day. I marvel that people can find 8 hours a day where they don't have other stuff they have to be doing.
I very distinctly remember reading in a Guitar World magazine, like when I was like 16, about Steve Vai, right?
Right.
And he's like, I woodshed it, and I got to the point where I was doing 7-8 hours a day, and I was like talking to my buddy Ryan. I'm like, we're so far behind right now. How, if we're going to be kind of even remotely cool guitar players in the world, we've got so much work to do, because we just hang out, smoke pot, and jam out. Now, him being much more studious, he was the guy that would I'll get all the Stevie Ray Vaughan videos, and he learned a bunch of licks, and I was like, that's really cool. I don't have the attention span for that. I just want to write my own thing. I learned a handful of riffs through the years, but it's just interesting how people are, and you're very studious too. You're very somebody that can kind of dive in and find the thing, right?
I think what I am is I'm consistent, and I strive to give my full attention on what it is I'm doing. So, okay, when I say I practice 4 hours a day, that's guitar in hand practicing. But I might spend another 2 hours working on composition or studying orchestration. Nice. Or looking at scores, or doing things that are music related. Or, nowadays it's like you have to do everything. You have to, social media alone is sort of, it's like you don't really have it as an option. Even if you don't want to do it, you still have to do it. And then things like, planning gigs, booking tours. Even if you have help, you still have emails to respond to and things to do. So even if it isn't time with my hands on the fretboard and a metronome on, or, fully challenging myself, a lot of my day is spent. Music's the main thing I do. So that's, and keeping myself fired up a lot of times means recognizing if I need a change of pace or something. The Django thing I did was a perfect example of that. Sometimes right after I finish a big project, or a lot of my energy has all been headed towards something, whether that's a gig or a recording or whatever it might be. Right after, sometimes there can be this sense of, what do I do now? Because all of your time's been spent with that end in mind. And I think it was after one of those times that I kind of sat down going, okay, so that event is now past. Now what do I do? And that's when I thought, okay, I need to get back in the swing of just my normal personal growth practice. And I just thought, I've never learned a single Django lick. How stupid is that? So I sat down just to think, I'm just going to learn a couple of my favorite licks. And then I realized I liked all of them. So I learned them all.
That's awesome.
But I think that if I can recognize that my practice and my path on music, that there are certain parts that are consistent, and then there are certain parts that are always changing. And so I might have a week where I write the whole week. I might have a week where I just shed on technique.
Mm-hmm.
I might have a month where I, just do whatever it might be that is my goal or my obligation because of whatever I have coming up. I just did a course recently for jam play.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, Francis remembers that.
Kiki.
And it was a really cool learning experience, but it was a lot of work, to get it prepared, and then I picked all of like the most technical things that I do, and so I had to get them up to speed. It's one thing to record an album and be like, cool, I just got to play this, just got to be able to play it right once,
right,
and get it for the record. But then to be able to do it consistently and to do it slowly and to remember how you did it, and
it's a whole other game.
Yeah, so that was my entire focus for a couple months. So
outside of your dedication, because like what I hear you saying is that keeping and refining your focus mm-hmm. in life, like having the goals set, mm-hmm. and then like letting yourself be kind of free within the confines of what you mm-hmm. set up, so that this week maybe it's mm-hmm. this, the mm-hmm. next week it's that, and depending mm-hmm. on the goal and what your dates are and
right.
all that.
Right.
But like outside of the music part of it, like what in life, is there a philosophy? Is there something that your parents or somebody along the way told you, and that you kind of hold dear, and you're like, that kind of just pulls me in towards my center? Or
that's a great question. I would say, if anything, I like to live with, like, as a student, to always try to be learning new things, and to and to keep my mind as open as possible. It's really easy once you get out of childhood and you don't have adults constantly kind of directing your life for you, to fall into just what I was saying, the minimum effort required just to get by.
Right.
And that doesn't do anything for me. I love to learn new things. And the benefit also, not just to try to be as, know as much stuff as possible, but the more stuff you learn, the more points of commonality you have with other people. And to me, human connection is one of the most beautiful things that we have. I mean, to be able to, through these crazy brains that we have, formulate language that somehow enables me to get an idea from my head into yours, and that through that to have, an interaction and a connection is something that I find so fascinating. We do it with language, and music is a language.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, the two are very interrelated. So continuing to learn both about language, music, or otherwise, about humans,
mm-hmm.
and about the things that humans find interesting or important. Even stuff that maybe isn't my thing. I've read books on religion, even though I consider myself a spiritual agnostic.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But at the same time, like, I've read the Bible because it's so important to so many people, and I want to understand people.
Wow.
I've read things that aren't necessarily what I part of a doctrine to which I subscribe, because it allows me to have better insight into somebody I might be talking to, and be able to relate to them in a way that's real.
Wow.
So I don't know. That's kind of a long, boring answer, right?
No, I can really appreciate that. Like,
really?
I mean, there's just in the sheer amount of points of view that we uncover through our lives,
mm-hmm.
from early childhood, and you don't really recognize that they're points of view
mm-hmm.
until you start picking out that, oh wait, people from different parts of the world, different parts of my own county,
right.
different parts of the state,
right.
see things differently, and people of different genders, of different sexual orientation. You start to kind of go, wow, oh wait, it's not just all this, what my parents thought and it passed down to me, but there's this whole world of perception.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to tell me that you're like, oh well, I don't really I'm not subscribing to this, but I'm okay with spending some of my time in life to understand it, because I recognize that it's such a catastrophically huge influence on a huge portion of the people on this planet, which I've considered myself, a part of.
Yeah.
That that's cool, because you that means that you're looking to connect. You know, you're looking to understand.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel like on a fundamental level, most humans want kind of the same thing, and we just have different perceptions as to how we get that, and different situations that cause us to have different priorities. But I think if you can sit down and with an open mind really try to find those points of commonality, those are some of the best conversations I've had. It's not necessarily having somebody who thinks exactly the way I do reinforce everything that I've always believed.
Wow.
But when you can actually see the world or see things through another person's perspective, I mean, that's empathy. You know?
I love that too, because I'm such a diehard long-term fan of Alan Watts, and one of the things that he kind of comes back to in his lectures is like, I don't know who I am without you. You spring up, you ask a question or make a statement, and I don't know how I feel about that thing or that subject or the situation until then. When you appear in my world and say, I'm a Jazz 3 girl, and I'm like, oh, well, that's cool, I really like this type of pick, or whatever, you know, like, there's no reason to express it until something, and if you say, oh, well, I'm, the spiritual agnostic, well, okay, then somebody that's a Jew or, there's a Muslim or whatever, they go, oh, that's cool, I'm, born and raised Jewish, you see, like my facial features or whatever, and you can unpack it from there a little bit, and just, I don't know, I think it's an interesting thing because we all these different perspectives that we do have, but when it's a kind of a mutually arising thing, like there's X amount that you're born with, and that kind of almost lies dormant until somebody says, oh, I'm this way, and you're like, and you have to take a second to decide, especially early on in our lives, am I that way? Do I agree with that? Yeah. I don't know that I do. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, check on the other side of the box here. I'll check on this. And so we get to know each other through relationship. Oh, that's so right on. Right? I agree. One of the things I've always thought is that we're kind of like bats. It's like we learn about ourselves through echolocution. It's like you put something out there and you think you know what you intend, or at least you know what your intention is. But you don't know whether it has the effect you desire until you see somebody's reaction to it. And so it's like we do kind of go about being like, how's this? Oh, wait, that didn't, evidently that thing I intended as a compliment really didn't go over well. Right. Or whatever. Right. So that's such an important part of how we continue to learn about ourselves. So basically just saying what you said. Yeah. Echolocution? Is that? Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah. It's like you send out a signal and you know where you are when you get the reflection. Yeah. We're just kind of, and that's what like Jadoo Krishnamurti talks about, the mirror of relationships. So like we're always like, in a lot of ways, when we look at the other person and we find ourselves either like attracted or repulsed, oftentimes it's really not them necessarily. It's that aspect in us that that's being mirrored back to us, that we're like, and we get into this weird thing, but that's oftentimes not known until we become a little more conscious about, and get a little deeper into our own scenario and get deeper into relationship. It's not something you can kind of see or know, but I find that really fascinating, actually. Yeah, so I do too. That. And I feel like it has an absolute application in terms of music as well, is that we can sit in our living rooms or in our bedrooms or whatever and come up with stuff. And I do believe, I don't want this to sound like I'm against having a strong foundation, which is part of artistic integrity. But you learn about who you are musically as well by putting stuff out there and then hearing what people hear in it. And that's why, at least for me, getting on stage and releasing music and presenting it live and presenting it recorded and all of that is an important part of my path of discovering what do I have to say as a musician. How do I want to grow as a musician? What are people hearing? How is it affecting people? It's part of it. It's that feedback. Sure. and what do I have to say in response to what I've now understood.
Right.
Yeah. What is my message? Do I have one? Sometimes I don't have one. Sometimes it's just listening and taking it in. Sometimes you feel very compelled.
Right.
This is the riff.
Right.
This is the way it sounds.
Yes.
No, we need to practice that a few more times. It has to sound like this. It's coming from deep inside, so we need to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that conversation that happens between the musicians, and we could go on and on about how, especially early on. I mean, I remember trying out all these different people for trying to put a band together. You know, and just like, no, it's like this, and like, you know, and you find certain people hear you a certain way, and they translate what you give them, but not very many people actually like really hear or really see you. And you go through all these people like, oh yeah, you're not hearing me that way. That's not no, okay, that's all right. Next. Oh wait, you get we're speaking the same language now. Yes. Okay, cool. All right, so we should stick around. We should try this some more.
Yeah,
and then kind of go down that road. But
yeah, it's that importance of rapport, especially when you're making music with people. I mean, it's rapport that you have, you know, with an audience, rapport that you have with your bandmates, and also rapport that you can have with your instruments and with yourself. I mean, I find that as we constantly learn and grow as people and as musicians, the thing that I've learned I can forgive in myself, I can forgive immaturity, I can forgive mistakes, I can forgive a lot of stuff. The thing that I have the hardest time digesting is when I can tell that I'm being disingenuous. Like, I can see videos of myself as a kid, and I can be like, God, I was sort of trying on a personality that day, you know, for whatever reason. You know, kids do it. Sure. And I feel like that disingenuousness is the thing that every time I hear it in something that I've ever said or done is the thing that just is like fingernails on a chalkboard.
I can hear that. I mean, I've caught myself being recorded, or you know, I've caught myself in real time occasionally. But I will say that it's interesting to be maybe forgiving for that young Gretchen, right? Because she was just this beautiful, innocent person seeking, you know, to find her voice, find her place, and I think we have to try on lots of personalities, like initially, you know, and I don't know. I'm of the mind that I'm not sure that personality is all that fixed. Oh,
I'm with you actually on that. I think I'm 100% with you on that, because so my mom's a psychologist, and so I've always had this kind of pet interest in things that lean in that direction. Okay. Mine's maybe a little bit more towards like neurology and how it affects music, and one of the things that I think about is when people. There's the truism, people don't change. But of course we do. Practice works, so we can change, right? So if practice works, doesn't that work? It works in terms of our bodies, obviously. We can't go and work out for a month and then expect to see the results for the rest of our lives, but we know if we do it every day, then we're going to be in good shape.
Right.
We know that we have to practice our instruments, if not every day, pretty close to it if we expect to even maintain our current abilities. And it's the same with our thoughts and our thought processes. And one of my greatest problems, or I should say challenges, has been that I tend to get frustrated very easily. I mean, that's if there's any part of my personality that I remember even from the time I was a small child, I just remember feeling this sense of rage when even really stupid things, you know, when I couldn't get my sock off, you know, I was in my car seat and I couldn't get my sock off by pulling by the toe. Really silly things. And then actually not even that long ago, deciding, well, wait a minute, if I want to get better at improvising on guitar, I practice improvisation. If I want to get, you know, better at cardiovascular health, I do it more. What if I were to really make a dedicated effort to trying to rewire my brain to be less reactive to things that frustrate me?
Ooh.
And I'm not an exquisitely patient person now, but I can say that I have noticed that in putting forth a daily effort, you start to notice little changes in yourself, and you start to see that your life can be improved by some of these things. And so something that is an integral, or for so long has been an integral part of my personality, is something that I've determined really doesn't help me, and certainly doesn't help my relationships.
Right.
And so just say, okay, it's less important for me to hang on to something that isn't helpful to me than to be somebody who can make a change. So yeah, our personalities don't need to be fixed.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I identify too with that kind of frustrated person. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't all. I mean, I'm trying to think of when it hit, but I do remember, especially as adolescence hit, I kept finding myself having these little outbursts, like with friends and stuff, and getting is extra frustrated because like somebody didn't understand what I said, or I wasn't speaking clearly, or I finding these little frustrations, and then I realized in my 20s I was like, I'm a lot like both my stepdad and my dad. They're both kind of hot-headed. Neither one of them did a lot of work, I mean, on themselves. I mean, they did some, they're good people, but like they both got their tempers, and like I just kind of inherited and was conditioned by that as the male figures that were predominantly in my world. And then when I was introduced to yoga and meditation, like I started to notice that I could take the edge off. Like it didn't fully, especially not initially, doing yoga once a month or something, and trying meditation every once in a while. It didn't, like you said, it didn't, but I did feel immediate results. And I started to come in contact with a different way of being in the world. And then I was like, oh, I could let it go maybe a little bit. I could, not be like, so tight around things. And so I can identify with that. That's a big thing to be willing to take a look at your conditioning, to notice the pattern to begin with, right? And go, is this still serving me? How is me getting angry right now moving any of this forward?
Oh, totally.
Is it, or is it probably not?
Totally. I completely feel you on that. I actually, I'll find myself getting stupidly triggered. Somebody will send me an email asking me to do something that's so like, can I Google that for you? Kind of things. Like, and I realize that the amount of time and energy I'll invest in being annoyed at somebody for asking me to do something for them that's so like, that's like a silly request or whatever, I'm like, I could just do it. And it's actually quicker for me just to be like, yeah, here you go. As opposed to tell them why it's not my job or not my problem.
Amen.
It's hard.
In my finer moments, I'm of service in that way. I will just be the path of least resistance and say, yeah, sure, I'll go do it. But I also, I have to, sometimes
hard.
mentally talk myself out of it in a split second of like, that's standing right behind you. You could just grab it, right?
Right, exactly.
But you want me to?
Sure, here you go.
Okay, yeah, I'll get it.
I had a guy at TSA. I was traveling with Daniele. We were literally the only two people like in this TSA pre-check line. It was like 11 p.m. We're on the last flight. There's nobody there. And Daniele's carrying all of this stuff. And so I have our, boarding documents. And the guy at TSA was just like, no, he has to hand me his boarding documents. I was like, okay.
All right.
So, here you go. Okay, feel better about that one now?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
It's such as life.
Yeah.
Well, for only intending to like talk to 20, 30 minutes, we're close to an hour now.
Of course. Okay, you can chop it down. Take out my long, boring rants.
I think everything is great here. I just I still want to ask you the last bit.
Tell me.
I want to ask you about what are, because you're obviously a lover of music and musicians. I mean, are there a couple, maybe 2 or 3 artists or bands that are maybe not that well known that you could see that need a shout out?
Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, so many of them, but I'm just going to give you the first 2 that come to my mind.
Okay.
And actually, I don't mean this in a self-serving way. So Alexandra Zerner, I just did a guest track for her. Her latest album is exquisite. It is a concept album the likes of which, like, anybody, you don't have to like concept albums to love this album, but if you like concept albums, it's essential. It's called Opus. I'm not sure if it's 1880 or 1880. I think it's Opus 1880.
Okay.
It's like 2 hours long.
Whoa.
It's deeply compositional. It's got this incredible concept that runs through it. And when she sent me the track for me to guest on, like, I actually was like, I had to sometimes pause because I was so moved by how beautiful the music was. And it went, I remember dreaming about this music and everything. It's really, really spectacular stuff.
Okay. I'll look her up.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Really, really great musician. Gosh, there's so many. And I'm sorry, like, I don't mean to just be plugging the two things that I just did guest tracks for, but I think the reason it's just fresh in my mind of people who are fantastic. So
it's okay.
Lee Rath. Yeah.
Okay.
Really fantastic player. I don't think the album is yet released. At least I'm pretty sure it is not. But he's an absolutely fantastic guitar player. Just everything from gorgeous, like, Jeff Beck type melody stuff to shred that's pretty mind-boggling. Like,
cool.
Really great stuff. I haven't heard the whole album, but I know the track he sent me. I was like, oh my God, are you kidding? This is fantastic. And I have such respect for his playing.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Well, give me one that you're not on.
One that I know. I'm so sorry. Like,
just anybody like that, or it could be something you're listening to. What are you listening to right now? That
on my record player is Ravel's String Quartet.
Oh, okay.
I happen to. Well, I listen to a lot of classical stuff as well, and I guess it just depends on. I don't know. There's Thelonious Monk.
Yeah.
I listen to different things at different times. Well, okay. I've got one other. Joe Robinson. I mean, I don't want to say he's unknown because he's gotten a lot of accolades for being fantastic. But I first saw him at a festival, and he was told to me as being like sort of a Tommy Emmanuel protege or whatever. Okay. He is such a ferocious guitar player. I mean, just stupid good.
Joe Robinson. I don't know.
Oh my God. Okay. Like, insane. Like, really, really amazing guitar player. Great sense of feel and timing and just ripping technique, but technique all with a musical purpose, and never technique just for its own showiness. Right. Really amazing player. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Well, we'll wrap it up, and this is the end of Players Pick Podcast, episode number 2 with Gretchen Menn. Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you, Chris.
Players Pick Podcast, Picks and Perspective with Chris Johnson. Pool table. Painkiller.